And welcome everyone. I would like to call today's meeting of the Missoula Board of County Commissioners to order on this Thursday, October 7th. We begin with our traditional land acknowledgement, and that is Missoula County acknowledges that this event takes place in the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kalispel people, which is apropos in that on Monday it will be Indigenous Peoples Day. So we want to recognize the original inhabitants of this place who still call this place home today. So will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you all for that. Any public announcements that anyone would like to make, particularly staff announcements? All right, and since we're going back to this virtual world, there are no members of the public in the room with us here in the administrative building. So everyone who is joining us is either virtually joining via Microsoft Teams or on the phone. Just a few housekeeping notices. So if you want to offer public comment at the appropriate place, either during non-agenda item public comment or during one of our public hearings, please use the raise hand function in Microsoft Teams and we will call on you in the order in which you raise your hand. Please be succinct and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less if possible, and try not to repeat others. If you're on the phone, hit *6 and start talking. I will queue you up. I will ask for public comment from our phone callers at the appropriate time so we don't have a bunch of folks talking over each other simultaneously. And with that, is there any public comment on items not on today's agenda? Okay, seeing none, our current claims list, and this is claims received by the Commissioner's Office as of September 15th through September 28th, total $2,235,578.72. We have 3 public hearings today. Each public hearing will open with a staff report, followed by either the applicant or applicant's representative presenting, if that is even applicable for the item in question. We'll open it up for public comment. We'll have questions from the commission and then have discussion and vote on the item. And we begin with a proposed plat and variation revocation on the Miners Edition subdivision. Bailey is going to introduce this for us.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay, let me share my screen here. And hopefully you guys can see that. Is it popped up?
It is.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so this is a request to revoke the Miners Edition subdivision and plan variation. The property is at 2801 40th Avenue, and I'll get into that here in just a second. So this is the subject property. It's down here off the end of South Avenue West, past Reserve. That's kind of behind, if you can kind of see it in the picture, the Target Range School is right here. And so it would be just south of that area. The subdivision was approved in April of 2006. It was subject to 29 conditions of approval. It was 19.4 acres subdivided into 128 lots. There's actually more to the property that was actually in a conservation easement that is still in effect on the property. So only 19.4 acres on the eastern side. And I have the little kind of picture of what that subdivision, what it was, the preliminary plat looked like on the screen. It was over six phases over 13 years. The phasing plan amendment was done in October of 2011, and that actually extended phase 1 to April of 2022, and then also extended phases 2 to 6 to extended phases 2 through 6 to April of 2029. The subdivision had a plan variation that was approved with it that modified the base CRR1 zoning. Normally, plan variations don't include modifications to uses, or at least now we wouldn't see those. But in this case, back then, it did include reducing some permitted and conditional uses that would have been allowed under the CRR1 zoning. And there was a condition of subdivision approval that the plan variation had to be approved prior to the final plat approval of phase 1. Now, phase 1 has not been filed, but the plan variation has been applied to the property. So our zoning regulations state that a planned variation applies to a specific property until it expires or is effectively revoked. So therefore, to remove the planned variation, the applicant has two options. They can either wait for the subdivision to expire in April of 2022. So basically just sit on it and do nothing at this time until April of 2022, or they can request to revoke the subdivision approval voluntarily. And that's what their request is at this time. And so we are recommending that the commissioners accept the applicant's request to revoke their approved preliminary plat and the planned variation. And I have a motion to that effect. Jamie is on the call here from WGM. I'm sure she has more information, but that's pretty much the short and sweet of it.
Thanks, Bailey. Jamie, would you like to say a few words?
Sure, thank you, Dave. So the reason that we are requesting this revocation of the subdivision approval as well as the plan variation is that our client is working with Learning with Meaning, who is a nonprofit school, outdoor-based education, and they are actually looking to locate the school on this property. And the plan variation prohibits that, whereas this base CRR1 zoning would allow that as a special exception. So the intention here is to move forward, hopefully within the next month, on a special exception application to the Board of Adjustment to allow for Learning with Meaning to operate on this property. The reason that our client has decided not to move forward with the minors addition subdivision is the expense to extend sewer to this property is just not financially feasible for them. And this is a new owner instead of who actually took the minors addition subdivision through the process. So just a small note there. But so yes, while we could wait until April, Learning with Meaning would like to move to this site sooner if possible, or at least start getting established there. I know that right now I believe they are in the new library building temporarily. So that is all I have to add right now.
All right, thanks, Jamie. Is there any public comment on the proposed revocation? Anyone on Microsoft Teams who would like to comment? Okay, seeing none, we will close the public hearing. It does not look like there is anyone calling in on the phone. So questions from the commission?
So Jamie, did you say this is a new owner than the owner who brought it? Because looking at that map, man, somebody really put a lot of time and effort and dollars towards creating this potential subdivision. So this is a new owner, is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, correct.
When did they buy it?
Within the last year, I believe they closed on it.
I knew. Okay.
Was this a Stuart Goldberg production way back when?
I think Northern Lights Development, if I remember correctly.
And his
Stuart.
partner, I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
He's still out there.
That's what there's a conservation easement on.
Yeah.
They commented on a previous
Yeah,
subdivision.
but that's trivial, I guess. So I'm happy to make this motion.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would move to accept the applicant's request to revoke the approved preliminary plat and plan variation for the minors addition subdivision.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? See none, all in favor?
Aye.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Jamie.
Jamie.
Thanks, Bailey. And let me just add that that as we've taken some heat in recent months and years about allegedly how long it takes us
It's
to
not
approve
missing.
various projects. Here's an example of a project that may not have come to fruition as originally proposed, but it's due to a property owner's desire or changing wishes of what that land should be used for that resulted in the ultimate revocation of this subdivision, not the red tape of
Right.
local government.
This is
So-
gonna turn into a drinking game. How
It
often
is, it is.
this
Every,
said.
when we bring this up, you guys have to drink coffee or something.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Okay, the drinking's begun,
Look at
so,
her go.
and that, let the record know.
Thank you, Jamie.
Okay. So our next public hearing, which I will open, is going to be provided an overview by Nick Xanatos, and this is the Saunders Aggregation and Family Transfer.
Thank you, Dave. Let me get my presentation going here, and we'll get started.
Hey, can I say a Nick thing before we even dive into this?
Absolutely.
So Nick, I've a family friend up in O'Brien Creek who apparently has been asking you lots of questions about potential subdivision stuff, but she just raved about you as a source of information and friendly and easy to work with, and so you got good
Thank you.
reviews.
Yeah, is that Valerie?
Yes, it is Valerie.
Yeah, she actually taught my sister at school at UM too. So multiple connections.
She's quite a great professor.
Yeah, totally. Awesome to hear. Okay, can everyone see my screen here?
Yes.
Perfect. So welcome everyone. This is the Saunders Aggregation Family Transfer. Sorry, I lost where I was at. There we go. So the location of the proposed aggregation family transfer is off of Mullen Road. We're in the western portion of Missoula Valley, approximately 0.75 miles to the east of Harper's Bridge Road. The property is zoned CA3. The 2019 land use element designates this tract as agriculture with a recommended density of 1 dwelling per 40 acres. There is many areas of FEMA designated 100-year floodplain and floodway on the property, as you can see the map outlined here with the various different designations. Getting into the existing on-site conditions, the property is 37.53 acres in size. There is currently one mobile home on the property, which is address 5963 Primrose Drive. The family transfer recipient, Cottrell Sanders, does live in the existing mobile home. Mr. Saunders, the claimant, does own some surrounding land in the area that's used primarily for agricultural purposes. Getting into the proposal, so at the request of CAPS, Carl is first proposing to aggregate tracts of record that came up during HG comment. And then after the aggregation, that would result in what you see here. What you see on our existing conditions. And then the proposed family transfer would result in the claimant's adult daughter, Cottrell, receiving a 1.03 acre tract, which is tract 2B. This does include her place of residence. Tract 2A would remain in Carl's ownership, and that would be 36.47 acres. The proposed density would be 1 dwelling per 18.75 acres. The application states that the claimant chose this particular piece of land to gift his daughter because as a single mother, the parcel provides her ease of access with a short driveway access to Mullen Road, and it is close proximity to neighbors. They added that developing one of Carl's other properties would result in increased road maintenance and snow plowing costs for Cottrell. Hopefully I'm saying that name right on there. This application was sent out for HC comment. We received 2 comments. The first is from the clerk and recorder's office, which commented about the presence of remnant tracts of record. And at the suggestion of CAPS, Carl and his agents have added aggregation language to the application to address this issue. And then our county floodplain administrator commented that the existing mobile home is permitted and compliant with existing floodplain regulations. And now I will get into staff analysis, and I'll go over the general Revocation criteria points that were triggered during staff analysis. Starting with general Revocation criteria point number 5, which asks, has the claimant engaged in prior exempt transactions involving the original tract? And this is applicable. A boundary line relocation was recorded February 14th of 2019, as shown in COS 6687. General Revocation criteria number 10 is, could the division be accomplished by a different exemption that could be more appropriate? This is applicable because Carl does own surrounding land. He could do a BLR. I do want to note that there could be some complications with this due to the floodplain issues. So while this is an option, I'm not fully aware of the ramifications of such a change. General Revocation criteria number 12, does the proposed division violate applicable floodplain regs or create access within a flood hazard area? This is applicable while it does not violate floodplain regulations. It does create access / building sites within the flood hazard area. General Revocation number 14 this is applicable. It has to do with growth policy compatibility, and with a recommendation of 1 dwelling per 40 acres, the proposed aggregation family transfer would exceed this recommendation at 1 dwelling per 18.75 acres. Finally, general Revocation number 18 just has to do with would this exemption have caused any significant impacts relative to subdivision review? And while it is believed that if the transfer had been brought forth as a minor subdivision, conditions may be imposed based off of the subdivision's location in a FEMA designated floodplain and floodway. And this just includes documenting compliance with the flood hazard area standards that we find in chapter 3.1.36 of the Missoula County subregs. Next, I'm gonna ask the applicant, who I believe is online with Eli Associates. We'll go over the family transfer questions.
Is there anyone on the line joining Eli and Associates? The applicant?
Thought I saw Steve on there. Let's Steve, you're muted if you're trying to talk.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
No, I didn't buy it with intent to divide it. I've had it for quite some number of years. My daughter got a divorce and needed a place to live, so we put it up there.
No worries. So I think that sounds like Carl speaking. Maybe let's. I'm gonna start from the beginning here, just to kind of punch through this in order here. Can I have you state your name for the record, Carl?
Carl Saunders.
Thank you. And then question number 1, which I think you started to answer. Did you buy the property with the intent of dividing it?
No.
Question 2, do you or your transferees intend to transfer the property within the next year?
No.
Thank you. Question 3, have you talked to anyone at the county about going through subdivision review?
No.
Thanks. And the recipient is not a minor, so we'll go through the last 2 questions. Question 4, will the property be developed?
Not in my lifetime.
Question number 5, will the recipient of the property be residing on the property?
Yes.
Thank you. And in conclusion of my presentation, staff is recommending approval of the proposed aggregation and family transfer.
Thanks, Nick. Mr. Saunders, is there anything else that you'd like to add right now?
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. Hang on with us there. We might have some questions for you. First, though, is there any public comment on this proposed family transfer? Okay, seeing close the public hearing. Questions from the commission?
A bunch of them here.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, thank you. Nick, you're saying there was a boundary line relocation. Was it in 2019 or 17? I can't remember. I get my odd numbers mixed up.
Yes, 2019. Here, I can reshare so I can have that date of recording.
Possible. it possible to show what was what there? What happened in 2019 I don't know if that's available on a map. I'm just wondering, and maybe Mr. Saunders can describe what was done and why it was done. It feels we're so close to 2019, like they would be related. This decision and that decision would be connected in some way.
Yeah, Mr. Saunders, would you like to explain that?
Certainly. The people that have the Primrose substation, the old Milwaukee substation that's there, needed a chunk of ground to add to theirs to make it available for historical site. And so they bought that little corner that's not marked tract 1 on the map.
In the bottom right.
Yes. And so that's what that piece of property was done for, was to give them 5 acres to go with that substation.
Okay,
Got it.
got it. Thank you. Nick, I'm not totally familiar with the technical definition of flood hazard area. Floodplain, floodway, I got, but flood hazard area was new to me.
Yeah, flood hazard area is actually just a term that we use in our subregs. Pretty much each potential hazard, like earthquake hazard, landslide hazard, we just call those hazard areas through our subregulations. So it actually just has to do with our subregs. Pretty much they would just have to meet our requirements for building within the floodplain.
Can you show us the slide again?
Yep. And this won't have the flood hazard designation, since this is just showing FEMA mapped floodplain.
What's the red and blue correspond to?
So this is zone A, this is 100-year, and then red is AE, this is 100-year floodway, and then the pink is 100-year floodplain with elevation.
Can folks on the line hear that?
And
Yep.
so that
Okay.
is,
And Commissioners, this is Tim Worley, just commenting on the special flood hazard area designation. Anything that's colored that you see on this slide is special flood hazard area.
Okay.
which is like everything anywhere
Yes,
near a
pretty
river.
much everything there.
Yeah.
So to follow up on that, if at some point in time a structure or building is proposed, there would still be a process by which, through gaining a building permit, that recognition of how that would need to be constructed or sited based on the floodplain.
Yeah, I was headed in the same direction. Are we unintentionally setting up someone for a situation where they think they're gonna go get a building permit and build on their new tract of land, and then they find out, oh, we can't build anything here?
No, so yeah, the building permit process would definitely catch this prior. Carl has gone through the process, the floodplain permitting process to permit the existing mobile home that is on there. I'm not sure if this property potentially could host any more residencies, because Carl probably knows a lot more about this than I do, but I know his drain field actually has to be pumped up to a non-designated floodplain parcel. So there would be a safeguard that someone would know that this is fully within floodplain. Obviously, when a parcel changes hands, the information could potentially get lost, but if someone would come in for permitting, this would definitely be caught.
And I guess we're going into hypotheticals here a bit, but what would Mr. Saunders' daughter's options be if she was to choose to build a house on her new property? What does she have? A field option?
Or she living in the
She-
existing,
She lives in the existing,
Yeah.
In the existing
That-
trailer?
it's only like an acre,
that's
right?
what's being transferred to her.
Okay, so no, how about the other piece of property?
No one can live there.
No one can live
That's
there.
that's what Carl was saying, not in his lifetime.
Well, unless it through the building permit process was complied with whatever our standards are for building
Yes,
within the
Are
floodplain.
we creating an unbuildable lot, is my question.
What are the elevations again?
I don't know. Tim or Nick, the question is, are we creating an unbuildable lot? And even if we were, maybe that's not germane, since the owner recognizes that that's what's being created.
I don't believe the lot would be completely unbuildable per se. I think there would just be many hurdles to jump through to get a mobile there. I think would have to be a mobile or a very elevated home. I could be mistaken on that. I know Steve worked with the floodplain elevations on the mobile, so he might be able to speak to a little bit more specifics.
Well, it seems like the concern is that there's creating a parcel that's unbuildable. And, really, we started out with a 37-acre parcel and created a new parcel out of that is buildable. And there is a manufactured home on that parcel right now. And we've gone through the floodplain permitting process. And so it's fully permitted. It's possible that other parts of the property could be developed with a similar elevated home like Carl has already established for Cottrell. The septic system could not be anywhere on this 38 acres. It would need to be pumped off site.
Okay.
So I think that's an important point. The purpose of the family transfer is to sever off the buildable lot for transferring, and nothing really changes with the remainder.
So, and Mr. Saunders doesn't live on the remainder. There is no structure there.
Correct.
That's my understanding.
Correct.
Is that correct, Steve or Mr. Saunders?
Yes. Yes, we've already, the whole piece of property prior to us going to the family transfer was in exactly the same state that the remainder is going to be in. And we went through the permitting process in order to put this manufactured home in there for my daughter. Got building permits, got the floodplain permits, already had an existing sewer up on top of the hill in what I think is marked track B. And already was approved for an additional sewer on that chunk of ground to put the sewage off site and above the floodplain. So I don't think we've changed anything. The new lot is going to be in exactly the same condition it was when I bought the entire chunk.
So are we left in it? Thank you for that. Would we be left in a situation now where your daughter's living on her own land in her house, which is great, and then if you wanted to, you could sell that other, I don't know how many acres we got now,
36.47
to somebody else, and then they could build something, but it would be pretty difficult, but they could do it.
Right. But it's a possibility that they could do it. They'd have to have a site that they could put the sewer system on that is not on that tract of land.
So I just have to say, were it not for that obstacle, I would personally see this as subdivision. And he just made two lots, daughter's living in one, he could sell the other. He's not, I would feel different if he was living in one and his daughter was living in one. But we're creating a situation where he could, and I'm not saying this is what Mr. Saunders wants to do, I totally believe him, but if he wanted to later, he could just sell this other 37 acres off. Somebody else could live there.
Although isn't that the case with all?
Well,
most
typically
transfers?
you got the parent tract and a parent living in that, and then the new tract and a kid living in that. Not a new empty tract that nobody's living in that they could sell off.
Yeah. I mean, in this case.
And these obstacles are so large, it's not eminently sellable. It's not, but otherwise I would personally see that as, well, this looks like you're creating a new tract that no one in your family is living on, nobody's living in it, it would be primed for sale, which is in a sense subdivision, creating a new lot. But I'll have no problem approving this because the obstacles are so large that it doesn't seem like it's buildable, though I guess technically so, but not in an easy way.
If I wanted to build on another piece of ground, I have like 6 other lots that are 127 and an 80 and a 70, and they're all out of the floodplain. I wouldn't go through the hassle of
going through that one to build a house on it.
Right.
Great.
Any other questions?
No, are you guys comfortable if I make a motion?
Yeah. go
Okay.
ahead.
I move that the board approve Carl Saunders' request to utilize the aggregation and family transfer exemptions as presented in the exemption application and affidavit.
I'll second that.
Further discussion on the motion to approve the family transfer and aggregation. Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mr. Saunders.
Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you.
And Nick,
Thank you, Nick. Our third and final public hearing is to open a public comment period on upgrading polling place tabulation equipment or transitioning to a central count of all ballots. Bradley, please describe to us what it is that's before us today, or before the public for comment, I guess.
Hello, commissioners, members of the public. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. I'm trying to share my screen right now. Are you able to see it?
Yes.
Fantastic. So let me get started here. And what we're doing is exactly what you just said. We are opening a public comment period and a discussion around the way we tabulate ballots. And Missoula County has been a precinct level tabulation county. We recently upgraded our reporting system. In 2020, we had purchased new ADA voting devices, and those run off of a different operating system, the same one that we just purchased. And what that means is that our precinct level tabulators, these M100s, would need to be replaced. And well, there's been a lot of changes between 2005 when we originally purchased that equipment and the way that voters vote in this current election. We wanted to have a public discussion around whether we should continue forward with a precinct level count and have ballot counting machines, these DS200 at our polling place, or if we should upgrade our process to a central count process. And a little background information is that we're the largest county in Montana which still utilizes precinct level tabulators. When they were originally purchased in 2005, the majority of voters voted at the polling place and absentee levels were in the teens. Currently, we have flipped that and we have 85% of voters who vote absentee with 15% of our active voters who vote at the polling place.
Hey, Bradley.
Yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I think your slides aren't advancing. If you're moving them forward, I think you can do it within the Teams app, the little arrow down at the bottom under your slide. I just want to make sure that everybody can see what you're talking about.
Let me load this back up. Thank you very much. There are some great screenshots on there. And see if I can get that loaded back up for you guys as well.
That was Ann
Thanks,
Hughes,
Ann.
our Chief Operating Officer for Missoula County. There we go.
There we go.
Now are you guys able to see them all?
I just thought you were very,
Yes, thorough.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me back this up just a little bit. So our upgrade to our new reporting software for everybody here means that with this new upgrade, what we will be doing is our M100 tabulators, the ones on the left there, would no longer be used. And in order to function with the new ADA devices and the new reporting software, we would need to upgrade to the DS200 precinct level tabulators. With this, being the largest county in Montana, which still uses precinct level tabulators, a lot of that is because we are one of the largest counties yet to upgrade to the new reporting software. During the 2020 general election, there were voters who came in. We had an all-mail ballot federal general election, and they wanted to see that their ballot got run through the machine to count. As you can see on the bottom of this screen, vote count literally goes up by one. Starts at number 1, goes up to number 2, so you can see your ballot has been deposited.
Appears to be stuck.
We got stuck there.
Did it get stuck for you guys?
Damn.
I love that we added that video to show you. What it showed was that the vote count goes up from 17 to 18.
Oh, there was a
Now,
there was a video.
This big discussion Yeah, just on the bottom of that vote count going up. We take that from our election judge training. When we look at this, the question is, do we remove all tabulators and go to central count? If we were to do so, there are some positives and drawbacks with any decision. There is a substantial cost savings on eliminating our polling place level tabulators. And these costs are really the purchase and maintenance costs. In addition, we have testing costs before each election to go through and prepare those. And then storage, delivery on election day, and then keeping them in our warehouse and maintaining them as they go through. Another positive is that on election day, even our best trained election judges can have issues, and especially with new equipment. We always want voters to feel as confident in this process as possible, and ensuring that our equipment is up and operating correctly is critical towards that voter confidence. The last area that's really critical is it provides uniformity. In elections, we like everything to be as uniform as possible between different counties and the way that we treat each voter. And so this would add uniformity because all ballots would be tabulated in the same capacity. With this, there's also a few drawbacks. As we see, the machine count goes up on that machine, but it'll also notify a voter if they put in a blank ballot or a ballot where they voted for more than the number of candidates they were eligible, an overvote.
Is that a drawback?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Well, so we'll talk a little bit about that on the next one. The reason that it's a drawback is that we would no longer have that ability, but it would uniformly apply the same areas to voters who vote by mail who don't get that notification as voters who vote in the polling place. Another drawback is on each.
Riley, I don't understand. I'm sorry. So it's a drawback that the machine would notify you if you put a blank ballot in or overvote?
If we remove those to a central count, we would no longer have voters who vote at the polling place be provided that guidance. When they vote,
wouldn't be able to tell if they overvoted or put in a blank ballot.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. In addition to that, for every election, we balance the number of ballots that we issued to the number of ballots that were counted. And it would make that harder to balance those poll books on election night. However, we have regularly gone through and updated that. Another area is that loss of confidence from not being able to see that vote total go from 17 to 18, and a potential increased concern about transporting uncounted ballots. Now, to directly discuss some of those, Josh, go ahead.
On the hard to balance poll books on election night, is that just a matter of time? You're not saying it's hard to balance the poll books, it's just hard to do it right then. Is that correct?
Exactly. And so after each election, as you can see here on this slide, we're going to duplicate the reconciliation and confirm the math of every polling place. The big difference is that they don't know how many ballots are counted without that tape from that machine. However, we had an opportunity to test this method and utilize central count in the 2017 special federal election, and all of the poll books were able to balance mirroring the same as a polling place election where that equipment would have been set up. In 2017, we had an unplanned special federal election for a House rep. And what that did is we did not establish all of the coding for this equipment, limited that cost savings, and went to a central count because it was an unplanned election. And we wanted to limit the cost to the county budget as much as possible. So we had the opportunity to test that. And after every election, we go through and we'll confirm that poll book math and present that at that canvas. We haven't done that recently because we haven't had polling place elections, but that's the other part of the canvas, is confirming each of those machine totals. Now, also to touch base a little bit about the drawback of removing those machines and not having it notify those voters of a blank ballot or an overvote, one area that it does is it makes it uniform between those who vote by mail as well as those who vote at the polling place. So when you vote by mail, you're not notified if you voted for more than the number of candidates in that race, and that would equalize each of those different voting populations, those who choose to vote by mail and those who choose to vote at that polling place. In addition to that, to cover our potential loss of confidence in the process due to not being able to see your ballot counted, sorry guys, I like this because as you wave, the camera moves to you and I can see you. Josh, please.
Okay,
For Dave.
the first bullet there, so notifying you if you put in a blank ballot. So how does this play out? If I'm going to the polling place and voting, presumably I'm handing the person I'm feeding into the machine the ballot that I voted that presumably is not blank.
Yes, exactly. And so if you did accidentally place in the ballot that was blank, before accepting that ballot, the machine at the polling place would notify with a series of beeps to the election worker to state that there is an error with that ballot. And it'll notify you specifically if you've deposited a blank ballot or if you voted for too many candidates in one race. And so what we do is when it's beeping, that election worker would notify that voter and say, it appears that you've deposited a blank ballot. We're going to return that and have you confirm that that's the vote you wish to cast. And so it is an additional safeguard at that polling place in a primary elections where we see that most regularly. Accidentally depositing a ballot for a party that you did not vote on.
That explains it.
Yep. And so then the other area is in certain elections where we have a vote for 2. If they vote for 3, it would notify them so that they could correct that and get a replacement ballot at that point in time. With this, it would actually equalize both the polling place and the absentee voters, because when you mail your ballot in, after we've opened it for processing, we're not able to link that ballot back to that voter and have them correct it. So while that is a drawback for those voters that vote in the polling place, it's also an equalizing factor. Did that make sense?
Thank you.
Can you,
Go ahead. Juan's got one.
can you talk a little bit more about the final bullet, potential increased concern about transporting uncounted ballots?
Yes.
Explain that process.
So this is a process that we currently undertake under every election. If we did not have counted ballots at the polling place by feeding them through those tabulators, we would be transporting uncounted ballots. In every mail ballot election, we transport uncounted ballots between the post office and our office every day. There is a clear process outlined in law, which includes transport by 2 sworn election judges, sealed containers, and corresponding seal logs. We have utilized this in previous polling place elections to do pickup of absentee ballots that are dropped off, and in the upcoming elections, any drop-off locations follow the same process. So while there could be a potential concern that now you're transporting these ballots from a polling place on election day to a central count, it's the same process defined by law that we've utilized in every election. What we're doing is we're just trying to help inform voters about how these laws are already in place to protect the integrity.
I just want
Thank you.
to be clear here. So central count doesn't mean the precincts go away. It just means we're carrying the ballots to a central location where they get counted by different machines.
Like going from the post office to.
Like going for the post office. And the reason I'm bringing it up is that if anybody's listening and they're like saying, I just love voting at Hawthorne School, you're gonna make that go away? We're not making that go away.
Nope, the difference would be that instead of putting it into a machine that tabulates it there and gets added to the totals later, it's placed into a ballot drop box and transported here, just like for every mail ballot election and like we did in the 2017 special federal.
But for the voter experience, if they went to Hawthorne School, would look just like and feel just like it always did.
Except we don't get to see the.
Except you don't see that.
And arguably would improve because we would be able to focus a lot more on other customer service areas by taking out that setup and training around the machines, as well as the seal logs setup and closing. So there are some steps and processes that take place on election day. And if we established our ballot drop boxes, we could focus on those other steps instead of focusing on the equipment setup and training.
And to reiterate on the reasoning for this, we've seen over the last, 10 to 20 years or so, a big flip in numbers of people who go to their precincts and vote in person and those who vote absentee. From at once was the majority voting in person at their precincts and the minority in absentee, it's swapped now.
Almost exactly. 85% voters were at the polling place in early 2005, and now 85% of our voters vote by mail.
So we're basically using a technology and a system that's designed for a sort of demographic split or behavioral split that we no longer enjoy.
Exactly. And we'll touch base on that in a little bit because that really impacts the cost of utilizing this equipment.
Thanks for the clarity.
Bradley, one last question. So at least one last question on this. So although rare, are there opportunities for human error utilizing the tabulation equipment at the precinct that would no longer be a possibility if that equipment was not there on site?
Absolutely. Even our best polling place managers, and I think even our chief operating officer, Ann Hughes, has made the mistake of not having our equipment set up correctly on election morning. And with that, we would want to go through an additional seal log. We're always able to correct any mistakes that may happen, but it's about this perception. So Ann, would you kind of explain a little bit about what had happened to you out at Hellgate there?
Yeah, there's something, this is back in the days when Vicki Zier was our elections administrator, and she created what's called the Dunce Award. Well, I will just say that I won the Dunce Award as a polling place manager.
Wow.
I believe I was at Target Range School, and you just kind of get in the zone and you're getting stuff done. And I just missed one little step in putting the equipment together on these M100 machines. So it does happen, and I'm a winner of the Dunce Award.
We need to reinstate the Dunce Award. What do you think?
I'd be wearing that thing around my neck every day.
And there are a lot of pressures on our polling place managers. They arrive at 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning. They have to set up each of our precinct registers, confirm ballots, as well as set up this equipment. What this does is it eliminates this equipment setup. As we were able to fix this error that Ann had made, able to get that to accept those ballots and through, but it's about the public perception. We want this to be as smooth as possible, and eliminating these additional seal logs, steps, and setup and potential errors could make it easier for judges on election morning.
Potential errors like the one that Ann Hughes won.
So I'm glad to hear, Bradley, that the elections office has let go of that. They're not holding on to this as a memory in any way.
That mistake by Ann
It's just
Hughes.
who was the mistake by Ann Hughes is
Yeah, we never put anybody on the spot.
From Ann Hughes.
More information and really boiling it down. You heard me reference earlier a few extra costs that we had discussed, and they were costs with our purchase and maintenance costs, testing costs, as well as storage and delivery. The testing costs and the storage and delivery costs are very variable depending on the scope and size of the election, so they were very hard to include in this discussion. For this discussion, I focused very strictly on the cost of purchase and maintenance to help get an idea of what these costs would be, because that is one of the biggest potential drawbacks of upgrading. The purchase cost is $164,000 to purchase this equipment and implement it into the polling place. It does have to have annual maintenance and licensing. So the maintenance on these is conducted every other year. Polling place elections happen only on the even-numbered years for the federal elections, for our primary and our general, but the charges are made yearly. So every year we pay $6,825. We would have the ability to split these costs between 2 fiscal years. So we could include the cost from ES&S on the first year, and then again on the next fiscal year, should we decide to go forward. As we break this out, one of the areas that we really look at is voter confidence and cost per voter. And so as we look at this over the first year, our very first year charge would include all of the maintenance, so it would be that $164,000. The number of polling place voters changes on a daily basis. So to help get this number together, I took the actual number of voters that voted in 2016 and 2018, and I averaged those together. So we have 164,000, and let's assume that every voter comes divided by 14,500 for the first year. If all of those voters arrive at the polling place, the cost for a voted ballot would be $11.33 per voters. That doesn't include the setup, testing, storage, and delivery, just on the purchase and maintenance costs. We're currently including those in our budget, so we can include those same costs at this rate. Now, as we go through 10 years, the cost goes up. And the reason for that is that Every year, we're paying for that service. However, they're only utilized every other year. So the cost on those is an additional $6,825 each year to maintain them. So at the 10-year mark, if all 14,500 voters are voting, the cost per ballot would go up to $15.57. And to head you guys off on a question, let's discuss what the cost per ballot is for a mail ballot. So we're looking at historic turnout. We did not decrease this number as has been the trend. We tried to keep this at a current snapshot in time, that 14,500 voters. So that would be the lowest potential cost. And in the 2020 all-mail election, our cost was $6.87, which included all of the Center for Tech and Civic Life funding. We spent almost $200,000 on outreach alone. If we just include our normal funding and expenditures, it was $3.88 a ballot. So there's a substantial cost difference between the polling place cost per vote and the mail ballot cost per vote. Because remember, 85% of our voters vote by mail. So in every election, we're going to have vote by mail ballots. And in a polling place election, we would have vote by mail ballots and polling place tabulated ballots if we decided to proceed forward. So with these numbers, we're seeing this change and we're seeing a big cost difference. Josh. Sorry, Josh, Benita, I like that. It goes to both.
So just to be clear, if we were really if we were really interested in just saving money, we would do away with all this in-person voting.
Arguably, to save money, mail ballots increase turnout and cost much less. We don't want to eliminate that polling place method of voting. We can still have the same cost per voter, but drop down the cost per ballot to tabulate them, because we would still have additional staff and other areas included, but we want to meet voters where they're at. And voters like voting in the polling place. We have 18%, forgive me, my math changed after doing some list maintenance. We have 18% of the voters that love voting at polling places. That's how I started working here, is by serving in a polling place. So we wouldn't want to eliminate that entirely, but we could drop costs substantially. Josh.
I'm not saying bad things about history here. Is there, given that when you started, everybody voted in person and that was a great thing, but now we're down to 18%. Is there a line you could foresee crossing when we get like below 10% or 14? I don't know what the arbitrary number is. When we get below a certain point, we just say, no more, we're just doing it all by mail because the cost savings and the turnout is so much better, which is really the two things that we're really concerned about. We want everybody to vote and we don't want to spend more money than we have to.
Or do we have the authority?
Do we have the authority
to
to do that? And I guess add on another question. Are there other communities out there in America of our size that have decided, geez, the cost savings are so worthwhile, we're just going to all mail?
So we've seen this in other states, and Dave, you hit it on the head. State law prohibits all mail ballots in federal primary and general elections. In 2020, the governor utilized emergency powers to override that state law. The legislature in 2021 removed the governor's ability to do that. We will always have polling place elections until a state law changes for the federal primary and general elections. What we see in other communities, and it is one leads to the other. Cascade County and Yellowstone County have both centralized their polling places for the municipalities. They still have outlying polling places in Ulm or in Laurel, but all of the voters would go to the Metro Center or the Expo Park, the fairgrounds in Cascade County. And what you see is that as they're consolidated, absentee goes up, and also vice versa. As absentee goes up, the need to consolidate is also greater. Our voters have stated that they enjoy polling place elections through the surveys we conduct with the University of Montana, so we'd want to find what worked well for Missoula. We would need to have polling places open, but a talk about potential consolidation in the future would be another discussion we could have, which would help make sure that voters got adequate service and in a way that they wanted that was appropriate for Missoula County. Did I get your question, Josh?
So we can go to all mail-in ballots for elections where it's not a federal general or a federal primary.
Absolutely. Or a special federal, to be fair. If we have another special election for a US rep, that would be a polling place election. And then in Missoula County, the city had opted for all mail ballot elections since 2011. And the school districts have been all mail ballot for quite a number of years. I don't have that exact date.
Thanks, Bradley.
So that's kind of a rough breakdown as what we're looking at for these areas. Now, we're trying to balance out efficient, accurate elections, service for voters to make sure that they receive the best service that they can, as well as being wise stewards of taxpayer dollars. So being elections, we want to have a good public discussion around this, public discourse and public comment. So as Dave, you stated earlier, this is the origin of a discussion to engage public comment, and they can be sent to bcc@missoulacounty.us or to call that main office at 258-4877. In addition to this, we have our election advisory committee on next Tuesday, and they will be making a recommendation to the commission as well as myself on this issue.
Bradley, how long is our comment period open until?
Public comment period right now slated to be open until next Thursday, where we could reconvene with all of the gained public comment and have a vote on this decision. Now, the reason for that is that we are already preparing for our 2022 elections. I need to train our judges on what they're going to do, so I need to know how we're going to operate for 2022. Will we be a central count county or will we be a precinct level count county, so that we can prepare our training materials accurately for those judges, order any required materials, and make sure that they're in and trained on time. So it is kind of a tight timeline, but the reason for that tight timeline is so that we can be well prepared for the next federal cycle.
Okay, so it's on the agenda already for October 14th, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Bradley. Is there any public comment on this proposed change? Oh, Ann Hughes.
Hi, I just wanted to talk about my Dunce Award some more, if I could. No, I just wanted to add that if we get a significant amount of public comment on this over the next week, we can certainly continue that and make sure that folks are getting enough time to share their thoughts on it. But if it's a relatively uncontroversial decision, then we can ask that you take action next week.
Thank you. Anyone out there on the line on Microsoft Teams who would like to comment on this? If so, please raise your hand. Okay, and I'm not even seeing any members of the media here to ask any probing questions. Anything anyone wants to say? Any other questions from the commission today?
Thank you so much, Bradley, for asking all our questions. And I hope you've learned your lesson.
And if anything comes up, if you guys have any other questions that come up, you can reach out to me as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks, Bradley.
Thank you, Bradley. Thanks, Ann.
Yeah. Ann Hughes, the final recipient of the Dunce Award. Okay, thanks, everyone. This will remain open until next Thursday, or perhaps longer, depending on the volume of public comment. Any other business to come before the commission today? Seeing none, we will be adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.